This goes on continuously. You're never satisfied with your ability to do this, and that's to be expected. You'll never be satisfied until you experience perfection. But every time you make this effort, you will begin to find the way yourself. But while you're making that effort, who do you think there is that's helping you? Who? The greatest power, the only real power in creation, wanting to give you that. What does Baba say? I love you more than you can ever love yourself. Here is that force, the source of all creation, wanting to give you infinite bliss. Don't you see? Which means that the more you put your mind on Baba and what he stands for, you start out here in a total external part of this edifice. And then your thoughts begin to preoccupy itself. And then gradually the thoughts become increasingly intriguing for you about Baba. It's like entering this edifice. And when you enter this edifice, you begin to find things that are filled with wonder. The externality of first thinking about Baba is somewhat bland and neutral. But then little by little your thoughts ruminate over what he stands for. And you're withdrawn out of your small petty preoccupations. You're drawn into the center of this edifice, or more inside this edifice. And what you see then begins to carry its own momentum. You don't have to try to think about him anymore. You're conscious. Why? Because that's what you are. See, Baba is your reality. It's impossible. Every time you look for something that gives you pleasure, love, no matter how shallow the level we're talking about, that motivation comes from the deeper reality that you are, that wants infinite divine love, infinite oneness, the abiding reality in the midst of constant change. That's what you are. It's impossible that an individual in time would not succumb to Baba. It's impossible, because he is totally the goal, and he as the goal represents the reality of each one of us, the thing we have been searching throughout time for. So it's impossible that when we see him with any degree of understanding, that we would not be drawn to him. Impossible. So Baba says, try, because I've given you that gift, that you believe in me with all of your weaknesses, with all of your stupidity, with all of your foolishness. You still hold in that shack of your home. You hold a priceless possession. You are conscious of it. That's the big difference between one and the other who doesn't have it. You know you have this priceless possession. Stop preoccupying yourself with all of these things that not only have less importance, but really have no importance. Our sleep state gives something that is nothing importance. Someone has whispered the golden words in our ear while we're in this deep sleep. That's that gift. It's possible to turn your head from the direction of millions of lifetimes into this direction. It is possible. So although that seems very long and difficult to us, we have to begin to see what is really true. It's not long and difficult. If it's possible in a very short time to experience consciously thoughts that are very important because they focus on the symbol of reality, the God-man, how can that be long? Otherwise, without that conviction, it would be impossible to turn your attention. It would be impossible to even begin to become intrigued by the mysteriousness. It would become impossible for this exalted idea not only to begin to counterbalance all of our attachment to the world, but actually to begin to make it disappear as a value for us. So Baba says, with me, your spiritual progress is slow. Without me, it's impossible. Those words have to be understood down to the depth of our understanding. So much so that the enormous good fortune we have becomes what we more and more and more and more become preoccupied with, not the burdens, but the enormous good fortune, while ultimately securing this magnificent freedom. And that's all Baba wants. That's the purpose of the avatar, to bring about the end of your suffering, which means the end of your ignorance. It can only happen through the God-man, because the God-man is the most magnificent presence of God for this crippled, limited consciousness, addicted consciousness that we experience now. Something that magnificent has to come within the realm of this dream. That with all of the din of illusion stands increasingly alone, separate, and draws us. Baba says, your conviction about me has to become absolute. That's our work. It doesn't happen like that. Nothing that I know of happens like that. Even Baba says, when you see someone born and all of a sudden at a certain point, he seems to become so spiritually awakened, so spiritually aware. The preparation was there in his previous lives. That's all. So this is a gradual thing. But the conviction must become absolute. And that can only come the more we think about Baba. You heard what he said, what he does. Thoughts. He takes this love song, this little positiveness that we say, oh, what a weak effort on my part to move from a negative thought to a positive thought. Baba is the source of all positive thoughts. You say to yourself, I haven't done anything. But you don't know that he's taken that positive thought and transmitted it throughout creation. That's what he does with his family. He takes all their struggles to go from negativity to positiveness, and he amplifies them and broadcasts them to the entire creation. But the most important thing, of course, beside his spiritual work, the most important thing is how we ourselves manage to become unslaved. So he says, the more you think about me, that channel, there's a channel between you and your own higher self. That channel can only be deepened and be direct in terms of flowing from you to God through the God-man. So the more we think about Baba, the more he is able to give us. And also in that discourse was the fact, which is always repeated by people whose function is not the function of the avatar, perfect masters. They always try to minimize our suffering. Always. If there are two events that both will result in an experience that causes further advancement in our understanding, the one that hurts us the least is the one that's going to be used. Because the one thing we want to do is to feel Baba's constant presence. Very real, very formidable. That expression that Baba used one time, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. That has to be absolutely understood in its literal sense, because it is absolutely true. But when we see it, obviously, the more we see the truth of it, the more we will be definitely motivated to making a greater effort to think of him. And with that kind of motivation, because we do understand more, we will be thinking about him in a different way, a more meaningful way. I am closer to you than your own breath must become more than words, and they will become more than words. There's no question about it. The inevitability of having belief in someone who is God-realized. The God-realized person helps creation, he helps the individual. He helps creation indirectly, that is to say, all the other individuals who do not know about him, he affects them indirectly. But the individual who is consciously aware of the God-man focuses on him, tries to make that incredible fact of existence, the total reality in human form, tries to comprehend that, to bring that within some kind of a working relationship with the thoughts that the individual has. I have thoughts. Here is this staggering fact. How does my conscious mind, with its usual preoccupation with thoughts, deal with this staggering fact? Well, the fact has to become more and more staggering. When it becomes more and more staggering, there's less and less difficulty in dealing with it. And Baba says, and ultimately love, he said. Do you remember those statements that Baba made? Certain instructions or admonitions. Do this, do that, do this, don't do that, don't do this. And then the next to the last one he said, and try to love me. But the last thing he said was, but if you cannot, do not worry because I love you. See? I can't even conceive of anybody who is as broad-minded as that. I mean, everything about Baba is enough to make you really draw close to him. My first experience, what an overwhelming friend. Really friend. When I used to think about Baba and I used to think about the word friend, every hair on my body stood up. Friend. When I thought of Baba as the friend, I didn't even know that spiritual aspirants like Rumi used the word friend when he was referring to God. This goes on continuously. You're never satisfied with your ability to do this, and that's to be expected. You'll never be satisfied until you experience perfection. But every time you make this effort, you will begin to find the way yourself. But while you're making that effort, who do you think there is that's helping you? Who? The greatest power, the only real power in creation, wanting to give you that. What does Baba say? I love you more than you can ever love yourself. Here is that force, the source of all creation, wanting to give you infinite bliss. Don't you see? Which means that the more you put your mind on Baba and what he stands for, you start out here in a total external part of this edifice. And then your thoughts begin to preoccupy itself. And then gradually the thoughts become increasingly intriguing for you about Baba. It's like entering this edifice. And when you enter this edifice, you begin to find things that are filled with wonder. The externality of first thinking about Baba is somewhat bland and neutral. But then little by little your thoughts ruminate over what he stands for. And you're withdrawn out of your small petty preoccupations. You're drawn into the center of this edifice, or more inside this edifice. And what you see then begins to carry its own momentum. You don't have to try to think about him anymore. You're conscious. Why? Because that's what you are. You see, Baba is your reality. It's impossible. Every time you look for something that gives you pleasure, love, no matter how shallow the level we're talking about, that motivation comes from the deeper reality that you are, that wants infinite divine love, infinite oneness, the abiding reality in the midst of constant change. That's what you are. It's impossible that an individual in time would not succumb to Baba. It's impossible, because he is totally the goal, and he, as the goal, represents the reality of each one of us, the thing we have been searching throughout time for. So it's impossible that when we see him with any degree of understanding, that we would not be drawn to him. Impossible. So Baba says, try, because I've given you that gift, that you believe in me with all of your weaknesses, with all of your stupidity, with all of your foolishness, you still hold in that shack of your home, you hold a priceless possession. You are conscious of it. That's the big difference between one and the other who doesn't have it. You know you have this priceless possession. Stop preoccupying yourself with all of these things that not only have less importance, but really have no importance. Our sleep state gives something that is nothing importance. Someone has whispered the golden words in our ear while we're in this deep sleep. That's that gift. It's possible to turn your head from the direction of millions of lifetimes into this direction. It is possible. So although that seems very long and difficult to us, we have to begin to see what is really true. It's not long and difficult. If it's possible in a very short time to experience consciously thoughts that are very important because they focus on the symbol of reality, the God-man, how can that be long? Otherwise, without that conviction, it would be impossible to turn your attention. It would be impossible to even begin to become intrigued by the mysteriousness. It would become impossible for this exalted idea not only to begin to counterbalance all of our attachment to the world, but actually to begin to make it disappear as a value for us. So Baba says, with me, your spiritual progress is slow. Without me, it's impossible. Those words have to be understood down to the depth of our understanding. So much so that the enormous good fortune we have becomes what we more and more and more and more become preoccupied with, not the burdens, but the enormous good fortune, while ultimately securing this magnificent freedom. And that's all what Baba wants. That's the purpose of the avatar, to bring about the end of your suffering, which means the end of your ignorance. It can only happen through the God-man, because the God-man is the most magnificent presence of God for this crippled, limited consciousness, addicted consciousness that we experience now. Something that magnificent has to come within the realm of this dream. That with all of the din of illusion stands increasingly alone, separate, and draws us. Baba says, your conviction about me has to become absolute. That's our work. It doesn't happen like that. Nothing that I know of happens like that. Even Baba says, when you see someone born and all of a sudden at a certain point, he seems to become so spiritually awakened, so spiritually aware. The preparation was there in his previous lives. That's all. So this is a gradual thing. But the conviction must become absolute. And that can only come the more we think about Baba. You heard what he said, what he does. Thoughts. He takes this love song, this little positiveness that we say, oh, what a weak effort on my part to move from a negative thought to a positive thought. Baba is the source of all positive thoughts. You say to yourself, I haven't done anything. But you don't know that he's taken that positive thought and transmitted it throughout creation. That's what he does with his family. He takes all their struggles to go from negativity to positiveness, and he amplifies them and broadcasts them to the entire creation. But the most important thing, of course, beside his spiritual work, the most important thing is how we ourselves manage to become unslaved. So he says, the more you think about me, that channel, it's the channel between you and your own higher self. That channel can only be deepened and be direct in terms of flowing from you to God through the God-man. So the more we think about Baba, the more he is able to give us. And also in that discourse was the fact, which is always repeated by people whose function is not the function of the avatar, perfect masters. They always try to minimize our suffering. Always. If there are two events that both will result in an experience that causes further advancement in our understanding, the one that hurts us the least is the one that's going to be used. Because the one thing we want to do is to feel Baba's constant presence. Very real, very formidable. That expression that Baba used one time, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. That has to be absolutely understood in its literal sense. because it is absolutely true. But when we see it, obviously, the more we see the truth of it, the more we will be definitely motivated to making a greater effort to think of him. And with that kind of motivation, because we do understand more, we will be thinking about him in a different way, a more meaningful way. I am closer to you than your own breath must become more than words, and they will become more than words. There's no question about it. The inevitability of having belief in someone who is God-realized. The God-realized person helps creation, he helps the individual. He helps creation indirectly, that is to say, all the other individuals who do not know about him, he affects them indirectly. But the individual who is consciously aware of the God-man focuses on him, tries to make that incredible fact of existence, the total reality in human form, tries to comprehend that, to bring that within some kind of a working relationship with the thoughts that the individual has. I have thoughts. Here is this staggering fact. How does my conscious mind, with its usual preoccupation with thoughts, deal with this staggering fact? Well, the fact has to become more and more staggering. When it becomes more and more staggering, there's less and less difficulty in dealing with it. And Baba says, and ultimately love, he said. Do you remember those statements that Baba made? Certain instructions or admonitions. Do this, do that, do this, don't do that, don't do this. And then the next to the last one he said, and try to love me. But the last thing he said was, but if you cannot, do not worry, because I love you. See? I can't even conceive of anybody who is as broad-minded as that. I mean, everything about Baba is enough to make you really draw close to him. My first experience, what an overwhelming friend. Really friend. When I used to think about Baba and I used to think about the word friend, every hair on my body stood up. Friend. When I thought of Baba as the friend, I didn't even know that spiritual aspirants like Rumi used the word friend when he was referring to God. I've had several very powerful experiences. I would say, even though the first time I met Baba, which is 1956, even though that was such a remarkable thing, it was not nearly as powerful as 1958, when what I experienced was such complete and total focus on his reality, his importance, his everythingness, that nothing else made any difference. Before that moment, I went through a very tremendous turmoil inside myself. This was down at the center. And then after that, I was called, together with my wife, to see Baba. And at that moment, everything was zero. That is to say, had no value, except his reality. And it was not an intellectual thing by any means. It expressed itself in enormous bliss. So I constantly was rubbing Baba's leg from his knee down to his foot. The entire time was doing that. And all the conversation was going on between my wife and Baba. And at that time, nothing that you mentally would attribute value to, such as Baba saying, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or you're very advanced, or you're on the plains, or you're this, or you're that, or you're going to become perfect tomorrow. None of those things would have made any difference, because that moment was so filled with meaning that everything else was irrelevant. The mind had slowed down so completely that it was able to grasp with an enormous impact his significance. So, notwithstanding that, my experience has been similar to the experience of others, that there were moments when Baba was very real and very close, and it was deep, deep, meaningful appreciation of his reality when he was in India and I was over here doing my ordinary little things. Over and over and over again. I do not think of Baba. I do not think of Baba in terms of when I saw him or things like that. I think of Baba now. I really don't even think about that. I think of him as this constant interaction, day to day, with him. And of course, this discourse points up how absolutely necessary it is for everyone. Because the people who were living with Baba, I feel quite sure, learned a great deal after he dropped his body in terms of what was important, what was vital. To focus on him all the time, this kind of thing. These are words. We believe what he says when he says them, but they're only words until the deep need requires the unfolding of the real meaning of those words. The vitality which draws you closer or focuses your attention on him in a far more meaningful way. And the struggle then is to disengage consciousness from all of your fears, all of your pressures. That's the struggle. On the one hand, we see the absolute necessity. He's not going to rearrange in the way we would like him to the little unimportant events of our superficial physical lives. Doesn't do that. Because what we want reflects our childishness. Now I don't mean childishness. What we want reflects our desires, which is far worse than being childish. And what he wants for us is the final and total freeing of our consciousness from that kind of slavery that makes us subject to every possible pressure that illusion, Maya, can generate, which is always changing. And Baba says, this is the way you are. So you really can't tell. The mind is shifting like, has no more permanence than the movement of water, of the waves. There's nothing permanent there. And yet what does he say? We try to establish an abiding reality in the midst of constant change. Why? Because our self wants an abiding reality. But Maya and our addiction or attachment to it causes us to try and establish this abiding reality in a place where it can't be established. So gradually we wake up to these things. So what Sarosh was saying to me, from so much experience with Baba, and he was the person that Baba always turned to for the impossible jobs. And Sarosh was of the temperament where whatever Baba said, whatever Baba wanted to be done, in spite of the fact that several others may have attempted to accomplish it with no success at all, Sarosh always, in response to Baba giving it to him, Sarosh would always come back and response would be, yes, Baba, as though it was a foregone conclusion that it would be done, period. See? And Baba really liked that Sarosh for that reason, really liked him. And Sarosh said to me, he says, whatever Baba has promised will happen. And every once in a while, the little events in my life, and whatever direction Baba gave me, I gradually see. And it's always surprising because you do get fixed in your attitude in thinking of where you're going, or the type of, or how your progress will unfold, you know? Or how bound you are. And as time goes on, you begin to see Baba not being bound by time. Even when he lays out a time period, you misunderstand when you try to interpret it in terms of your own limited understanding. He may sound like this much time, but where he means this much time, or even shorter. But inevitably, I see that this is continuing to unfold. That the many things that I thought of, that I have thought of in connection with what Baba has said, do come to pass. Now, the only difference in the relationship of one person to Baba and another person to Baba, is the attention and the focus of each of those respective individuals, the attention they pay to the importance of that relationship, the effort they make at trying to focus, trying to not only focus on Baba, but trying to understand what Baba is. What is he? You have little clues. He's given you many clues. The biggest clue of all is that which you can rest like a child in. His concern, his total concern for you. Now that's the big one. But beyond that, Baba wants us to try to understand what God is. To grope with, preoccupy the mind with that. After all, life is short. All of the events that we seem to place so much importance in are very temporary and rarely to our liking. The events that come within our experience are to a large extent, the important ones, so difficult for us to control, and so often beyond what, or the opposite of what we would prefer. And beyond that, the endless moments that our consciousness, addicted and attached to what is unreal, the endless moments that our consciousness is preoccupied with thoughts that are primarily rooted in worry and concern. So Baba says, look, this is your state. This is your state. You have a chance. This state that is nothing but abject slavery and total and ultimate disillusionment with everything that you go through and experience in life, rooted in your desires. That is like having looked in a given direction since the beginning of time, since the beginning of your separateness. And your belief in me is like having realized that there is another direction. You alone, because of your conviction and your faith in me, even though weak and small, it's like realizing what no one realizes, that there is another direction other than this total, abysmal, dead end that sees no hope in your imagination. He says, there is another direction. I am that direction. But you know, you can't turn your head so easily in this direction. You know it's over here, but you can't turn your head because you have been looking for millions of lifetimes in this one direction. So now you know there's another direction. You find the way to begin withdrawing or turning your head, to use this kind of a metaphor. Turn your head in this direction. Try everything that you can do. Now, one way that you'll want to try more is to be intrigued by what this direction will yield. I am this direction. I am God. God is not enough for you. That word's not enough. It's got to intrigue you. You've got to find a way to think about this thing, God, so that it becomes overpowering little by little.
Well, I think we have to recognize how hard it is not to be attached. You're talking about the work of very few people in meaningfully becoming detached by focusing on something real. How many people even believe in anything real? Many of us may hope for something real, but to have an embodiment of something real. Remember Baba once said, you need me. When you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. I take words like that and try to plumb the depths of meaning behind them. On the surface it has meaning, but I want more than that. What I want is something that's so powerful that I can't ignore it no matter what happens outside. When you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. I'm saying to myself, God is saying that. God knows everything. He controls everything. He's saying when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. My God, if that doesn't tell something as clearly as it can be stated, now it's necessary for me to recognize the powerfulness and the direction of a statement like that. There are many times I don't think about Baba. There are many times I think about Baba, but I don't think about him in the right way. So that's the work. You know, I think we're so asleep that we expect some kind of an instantaneous transformation through some intellectual recognition of something. And we must always remember what Baba said, the intellect is the lowest form of understanding. But, in your case, Jim, you have a fine intellect. But you also have a heart. And that struggle is going on, as it does with all of us. But once you come to the dawn, you've climbed out of this hole as we're all climbing out, and you begin to see your mind, your marvelous intellect will become a magnificent instrument in your work. You will come up with all sorts of creative breakthroughs. I have no doubt about that. But once the personal struggle, which is the most important struggle going on, is accomplished. If you were already perfect, it wouldn't be going on. It's going on with all of us. The real thrill is not that we want to be creative. That's the inevitable result of a person becoming convinced about reality or developing total conviction about reality. It's inevitable that the person becomes creative, and that's a joy. Then you don't no longer think about how many lifetimes I have, and it's really when you become free inside. It doesn't make any difference whether you have 1,000,000 lifetimes yet to go. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of God realization is to me a strange thing. I have no idea about what that means. The only idea I have, the only meaningful kind of experience I have, is when I become more free than I was. That's all. That's meaningful to me. When I become less offended, less reactive, that's very meaningful to me. Because that makes the goal come into focus. The representative goal, the God-man. See? It's not that I long to be anywhere. I'm less bothered by being somewhere. That's what happens. And that is enough. And that's enough. Because the whole world becomes a playground, really. Someone said, some person who was authorized to say it, I think it was Baba said this, but I can't remember where it was I read it. But it struck me because what was being said was, with this greater freedom, you don't see the world the way we're seeing it when it comes over the video. This terrible business in San Salvador, this terrible business in Poland, this terrible business there, this terrible business. No, it's more terrible when we have total, welded conviction that we're the physical body and we're so vulnerable. Everything is horrible then. If you're in paradise, you're going to imagine the smallest thing is going to fracture that paradise. You see? But when you become increasingly aware the reality of you, what did Papa say in this discourse tonight? Some value of taking astral journeys at least gives you the experience that you're not the physical body. At least that much. There's so much terror and heart-rendering suffering that arises simply from the conviction that we are so vulnerable because we believe we are the physical body and subject to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as Shakespeare beautifully put it. It's because of that everything that we see makes the world look this devastating, bleak, gray, this gloom, the 1,000 deaths that we constantly experience before we ever die, the countless horrible imaginings that go on through the suffering that's constantly beating our consciousness that we see everywhere we turn. Now the God-man doesn't see anything like that because he knows every experience of every individual is to make him free, is to bring him to a place where he'll experience something so magnificent that it can only be described in a negative way, infinite bliss. You see? Well, when the God-man sees those things, and for him to say that, he's saying, that is what all the instructions are about from me and from others who do my work. That's all of that's what causes you to struggle. That's what causes you to be so discontented. Because you're discontented because you are heir to infinite bliss. So you will never settle for anything less. But you don't know that. I'm telling you that. Now understand what I'm saying. I'm also telling you the way to get there. I'm also telling you that long before you get to the goal, you are entitled to experience freedom, which is love. But you do what I tell you. It sounds simple, but the work is very hard. The work is hard because you have been conscious of illusion since the beginning of time. That's when illusion began. Huh? That's right. You've been out to lunch since the beginning of time. Don't expect you're going to get rid of it just like that because some God-realized man, such as me, I create everything, and yet I can't tear you away from where your consciousness is. But if you learn to love me, not only will you be torn away from the illusion that gives you such terrible suffering, not only that, but you will become a God center in your own right. See, the two vases, the fragile one that was cleaned instantly, give you God realization instantly, and the other one painstakingly, millions of lifetimes of gradually growing, gradually getting stronger, and then standing there in your full achievement, your pristine glory, solid and real, your consciousness forever experiencing infinite bliss. That's what Baba wants for us. And he doesn't care. Well, nobody says, say whatever you think I am. If you think I'm the devil, say so. It doesn't bother me. Nothing can harm me. But it's honesty that I want from you, because honesty will make you grow. Honesty will take you to the goal. One of the main things that I think I tried to communicate to you was that the best understanding of what was going on in anyone's relationship to Baba leads that person to realize much more clearly with his effort that Baba, in fact, invisible as he is, as real as the world seems to be, and as mechanical as it seems to be, Baba really is directing everything. The individual has to come to a greater conviction about that. That's not something, it can be stated in words and sounds very simple, but it's not a simple thing to do something about it, because that is what takes almost every moment of every day, or at least all the effort and more that the individual can make to develop that kind of conviction. And what happens then is through this conviction, the individual begins to see that this reality that we refer to as Baba, who really cares, is the only one who really cares about your real welfare, is really, from moment to moment, actually arranging the events of your life. And that the growth of this conviction with a tremendous amount of work, the most worthwhile work that can be done, gradually makes it clear to the individual that that is the important thing. The reliance and conviction about Baba, not all the other things, no matter how exalted our work may seem to be. It's the conviction that makes us able to function in our work with any degree of anything that's worthwhile. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's the conviction itself that makes us more patient with other people. Only with conviction about Baba growing does the individual feel like he's got a treasure somewhere. And if you feel like you've got this treasure somewhere, this great worthwhile thing, you're far happier inside, and consequently you're far more patient with other people. And that's the way I see it in a very simple way, although it is the most difficult thing in the world. Baba said it's possible through me. You know what he says in his universal message. It is possible through me. But that has to be viewed with the statement of the alternative. It is impossible without me. That's the way it has to be viewed. So the real work, Jim, because who can tell exactly how a person should deal with this, that, or the other thing? It depends on the person's intelligence. It depends on so many things. He may be preoccupied with other things. And even at that moment, his great ability might not even be available to him. But the attitude of positiveness only comes from Baba. There's an appearance of positiveness that says, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to persist even though these things are not what I like. It's the attitude that that causes the individual to gradually become increasingly hopeful or increasingly believing in the reality that Baba is, that is the thing that works. That's the thing, because none of us know the real effect of what we do. We none of us know. And that's a deeper meaning behind what Baba said when he said free will has always meant attitude. Always meant attitude. Whatever happens to you is my will. How you take it is your will. I mean, these are very profound words. They're profound not only because they're true, they're profound because they are workable to those individuals who believe in Baba. Believe in Baba is belief in God, but a real belief in God. See? But that doesn't mean we are free from worry. It means it's possible for us to become free from worry now. But that's what we always have to do. What happens in your practice, in my judgment, is only significant insofar as it reflects your work with Baba, which is your real self. Your shifting of consciousness in a meaningful way from the so many unimportant things that only have intellectual importance to something that you really can taste and smell and feel because you believe it. You believe that Baba is your higher self. You believe in God. You believe that you have an intimate, inviolable relationship with that reality. Now, our work is to develop the conviction, Baba says, till it becomes absolute. With Meher Baba, what I understand from him, and over the many, many years that I've confronted this meaningful influence in my life and tried to find the way to grasp it, tried to find the way to understand, tried to find the directive influence in my own life. Over the years, I've come to believe for myself that, first of all, if in fact God takes human form and He comes within my sphere of attention, however it may be, in physical person, in terms of actually seeing Him in the physical body and acting and talking, or in terms of simply believing, but a belief based upon a very recent appearance, where you can really know something about what He said and what He did without the intervention of many different opinions. And when that happens, that has to be a rare occurrence. Now, to say something is a rare occurrence doesn't mean to motivate you. The way I looked at it was, this rare occurrence, I had no difficulty whatsoever believing that Meher Baba was God descended directly on earth. Had no difficulty with that. Right from the very beginning, when I was most ignorant, I had no difficulty in believing that. But over the many, many years that have gone by since that time, this experience, this event in my life, has been something that I have grappled with. The effect of that was to make into something more meaningful the phrase, a very rare event has occurred. God descending into human. It had to be something personal. If this man is God, what am I doing here, acting in an ordinary way, reacting to all the normal pressures of life in the same way as I reacted to them before? What is wrong with me? I believe this man is God, which means that the entire creation now has a purpose, not only for me, but for every last person in it, and everything in it, so-called. The last month that I feel as though I have turned a corner. And I said, I'm trying to understand what I mean by turning a corner. And I think part of the explanation is I am not as attached as I used to be. I see Baba as a great inner event that doesn't depend upon anyone or anything at all. As a matter of fact, when you are really at bay in terms of everything descending on your head, you find out, perhaps, you realize more what you've had all along. So only when you're at bay in the world sometimes do you enter into the condition that will make you see what a rare thing you have been living with all these years without fully appreciating it. So the point I would make is the point that Baba made. It's simply that I'm coming to a better understanding of it. He said, focus on me as best as you can. I am the means of freeing you. One day, everything that you admire with eyes that can see, I am that. I am that, and the more you see me, the more drawn to me you will become, to the point where nothing can detract you again. And you will become increasingly free. And Baba said, you will find that I have always been your own higher self. What's a higher self? You can imagine something that some person that is so magnificent, however your imagination conjures up the qualities of this person. You can imagine someone that magnificent, and Baba is that and infinitely beyond that. And Baba says, do you know why, when you begin to see me, that you're really drawn to me? Because I am you. I am the best in you. You long for me because you long for your own reality. You are beautiful beyond description. You long for me so much, and you look for me in so many wrong places, illusory places. But those places too that you have looked have represented progress. Because without being disillusioned, you never would have come to the place where you began to see and look for me in the right way. This is the thing that Solomon pointed out today. He was talking about all of this suffering that a person apparently goes through. And I said, yes, Paul. I said, that's exactly the way I feel. That when you really look at all of this journey that you've taken, all this so-called suffering, that suffering was progress. Because it led me to the place here, led you to the place here, where you're able to see something meaningful. Without going this way, you perhaps would not have gotten to that point. So our task is a very simple task. Whatever it is that causes you to say, I have no choice now except to try. I remembered in the discourses something that Baba said. You'll come to a place where you look back, you're willing to change your approach to everything, your way of looking at everything. You come to the place where you see the total bankruptcy of all your past efforts. And it's that experience that says that gives you the necessary incentive with hope. It's not simply a dry, barren thing, not at all. Because if you see something that's so bankrupt about yourself, and then you're willing to try something new, that's far from being a hopeless outlook. That's a coming to a realization that's very important. You come to the place where you say, now I can capitalize on my relationship with Baba. I am indeed fortunate. When I was in New York talking to those people up there, I really tried to explain what was already a fact, that we are very fortunate in having this conviction. Very fortunate in having this conviction, because it makes possible a real, meaningful change in our consciousness. It makes possible a growth in the conviction that we have. And that's very, very important. Baba has to be seen for what he really is. The rarest of opportunities without any parallel whatsoever. Always the God-man affects everything in creation. The spiritual perfect masters are absolutely God-conscious. But their area of functioning, as Baba has said, is circumscribed. Baba, when God is in the world in the physical body, every prayer, when the avatar, the Messiah, descends into human birth and lives a human life, every single prayer and aspiration that comes from a genuine heart goes directly through the avatar. From whatever source, from whatever culture, from whatever identification an individual has with a religion or no religion, if it comes from the heart, it goes to the avatar. His experience is so far beyond what we can even begin to conceive of and imagine with the greatest mind. But you get little glimpses here and there that make you all of a sudden become transfixed about the staggering thing that you can see, which is nothing. And so the God-man says, listen, that's not necessary for you to understand all this. Just love me. I am worthy of love. So when you try to love someone who is truly worthy of love, you are doing something that is very important with your own consciousness. You are taking it away from all of the unreal preoccupations, and you're beginning to try to direct it towards something that can have real fruition for you, a real freeing. What you begin to see more and more and more by this effort of yours will result in it being easier and more easy for you to think less and less and less about illusion and become intrigued about the reality that I am totally the symbol of. You see, the first thing is to get right with Baba yourself. Keep it in the front of your mind. Immediately, when you begin to think about Baba in the beginning, you're not really seeing or feeling anything of significance about Baba because your mind is still out there. It's just a thought. The thought has to become such, just as though if you look over here and you're deeply preoccupied about something, let's say Baba is standing right there, and you've just gone through a traumatic experience, okay, that really rocks you to the bottom of your feet. And you look over here at Baba. Are you seeing Baba? Your mind is preoccupied upon this. That's exactly what it means to be attached to illusion. So your mind is preoccupied. Your consciousness is a captive of your thoughts. And your thoughts are rooted in your fears. And your fears are born of thinking illusion to be reality. So, when we look at Baba, just as I was reading the discourse, I think all of us probably, the more we heard, the more our minds became a little more quiet, and a little more quiet, and gradually began to hear some things. Same way. If I work with Baba, I don't want to see those people out there that are putting pressure on me, that come up with all kinds of things that I might react to in my work. But if I am thinking of Baba in a meaningful way, I am less bothered because my vulnerability is less, because I now see something that is really important and really real, and I'm related to it, as everyone is. The simple difference is some people are more conscious of it than others. That's the only difference. We're all that. And then when I go and deal with my problems, I'm much more effective in not reacting. And if the less I react, the more I see, the more I understand, the more I can cope with the many things that have to be coped with. So what I'm really saying is the same thing as you, Grant. It's just that my way of putting it is, I realize that the first thing is to try to keep Baba in the front in a meaningful way. And that's not going to be easy, but we have to keep working at it. Because the one thing we want to do is to feel Baba's constant presence. Very real, very formidable. That expression that Baba used one time, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. That has to be absolutely understood in its literal sense, because it is absolutely true. But when we see it, obviously, the more we see the truth of it, the more we will be definitely motivated to making a greater effort to think of him. And with that kind of motivation, because we do understand more, we will be thinking about him in a different way, a more meaningful way. I am closer to you than your own breath must become more than words, and they will become more than words. There's no question about it. The inevitability of having belief in someone who is God-realized. The God-realized person helps creation, he helps the individual. He helps creation indirectly, that is to say, all the other individuals who do not know about him, he affects them indirectly. But the individual who is consciously aware of the God-man focuses on him, tries to make that incredible fact of existence, the total reality in human form, tries to comprehend that, to bring that within some kind of a working relationship with the thoughts that the individual has. I have thoughts. Here is this staggering fact. How does my conscious mind, with its usual preoccupation with thoughts, deal with this staggering fact?
Well, the fact has to become more and more staggering. When it becomes more and more staggering, there's less and less difficulty in dealing with it. And Baba says, ultimately love. He said, do you remember those statements that Baba made? Certain instructions or admonitions. Do this, do that, do this, don't do that, don't do this. And then the next to the last one he said, and try to love me. But the last thing he said was, but if you cannot, do not worry because I love you. See? I can't even conceive of anybody who is as broad-minded as that. I mean, everything about Baba is enough to make you really draw close to him. My first experience, what an overwhelming friend. Really friend. When I used to think about Baba and I used to think about the word friend, every hair on my body stood up. Friend. When I thought of Baba as the friend, I didn't even know that spiritual aspirants like Rumi used the word friend when he was referring to God. I didn't even know that. See? Which means that where did that kind of a concept understanding come from? We each are God, So God makes his presence felt as we focus on him. So we will come up with similar concepts, won't we? We're bound to. You might disguise the language, but that doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. When there's reality in something, in some odd form, it's the reality that comes through that oddity. Truth comes through it. Words can be very clumsy, or words can be very unfamiliar. When you read spiritual discourses that are rooted in, let's say, a foreign kind of an idiom, an unfamiliar kind of context, like Hinduism, Mohammedanism, any kind of ism. And the words were the utterances of those who knew and experienced. That's what comes through. You're not put off. You're not confused by the unfamiliarity of the expression. It's the truth that comes through. This was my experience in reading the Bhagavad Gita for the very first time. This was my experience in reading self-knowledge, the Upanishads. And what was it? The truth inside was corresponding to what I was reading. So, yes, that discourse is very timely. And I sort of shy away from saying, well, this is an unusual time we're living in. But I suppose if you are being pretty accurate in terms of what you're feeling, then you can say, well, in the first place, I somehow sense, particularly with those Baba people I've known for a long time, I somehow sense the similar direction that we all travel, the similar thoughts that begin to be meaningful to us, in spite of the external differences. So it seems as though there is a correlation. You awaken to a correlation in the work, the universal work that Baba does, and what begins to become meaningful to you, or what you begin to see that you didn't see before. Like passing a building that you've passed for many, many years, and at one time somehow your attention is drawn to that building. It's though you saw it for the first time, even though you went past it every day. We gradually have to see the difficult things that happen to us in a different way. Because in truth, in the Baba community, when I say Baba community, I'm merely talking about those people who believe he is what he says he is. That these difficulties occurring to people in that kind of a community are really little love slaps from Baba. We certainly can easily imagine much worse things happening. And the difficulty that is there is that in spite of the way we feel, to struggle to accept it as his will, and his will works for our highest good in the easiest way. Our effort is to struggle to accept that. And then Baba would have us even go further than that. He said, then you get to the place where you become cheerful in your acceptance of it. Well, we know that's hard. If we know it's hard, he certainly knows it's hard. You know what it's like when you have concern for someone else, when you have feelings for someone else. You're able to forget yourself to that extent. And here's Baba who has total concern for you. Total concern. We have to begin to identify in terms that we can understand and appreciate and feel something more exalted in Baba so that we draw to him. The strange thing is God himself is saying, try to love me. That's really strange because it seems to be so contrary to every religion, as it is practiced anyway. God himself says, try to love me. This is really remarkable. That always staggers me. I can be walking along and I'll stop. Almost become transfixed. Because it's something that you want to grip somehow. Find the way to deal with that. And yet, it's that kind of thinking that is meaningful. Even though Baba said that you can't really understand. I use this story over and over again about holding up God speaks, and Baba says in 58, who understands this? And I don't remember who responded, or if anyone responded. I don't remember anyone responding, but anyway, that's not important. What was important was what Baba said. He says, I don't understand it myself. See, but yet at the same time, he said, you must try to understand everything I've said. And one way, certainly, of understanding the importance of this directive, or this admonishment on his part, is that our minds are trying to, our consciousness has to now preoccupy itself with the things that Baba has said. Baba said, think of me in any way that you can. In time you'll think of me in the right way. Anything that makes you think about me or helps you to think about me is good. See, anything. So if you have a picture of Baba, some people don't like hanging up pictures, or some people don't like wearing the whatever on their sleeves, or going around and holding up signs, or this kind of thing. But if to that person it is helpful at that person's place to make him think about Baba more, that is a good thing. That's what Baba's saying. That's why we really can't, it's not our place to judge anyway. What does Baba say in one of his discourses? Do not waste your precious lifespan judging and criticizing your fellow man. But that's got to be so deeply and grippingly felt and understood. Do not waste. No, what does that say? It says, if you see a mountain of things to criticize in another person, he's that gross. You see? Baba is saying, do not waste your precious lifespan. Waste. God himself is saying, do not waste your precious lifespan judging and criticizing your fellow man. He is saying that there is something priceless for you to be preoccupying yourself with rather than that. See? That's what he wants us to think about. I feel that if you're in Baba's family, you're very special, which means you've had past relationship with him, see? And for some reason or another, notwithstanding this exalted relationship, we seem to be living rather ordinary lives. Well, if a person struggles to not be ordinary, when he sees everything about himself as ordinary, I feel that Baba, in an avataric period, is taking that effort on the part of that individual and infinitely multiplying that energy and using it for his universal spiritual work. So that individual's effort is not ordinary. In the first place, it's authored by God himself. That's the motivation. You're not conscious of that so much, but that's the motivation. How could that be ordinary if it's motivated by God himself? Everything's motivated by God, but this is a motivation which brings you directly to him. The significance, again, of being in a Baba community. that you believe in him, is that you go directly to the avatar, directly to the goal, directly. You know, Baba said many things that point up to one basic statement, that he controls every little thing. You can work that out in any way you want to. And to me that means whether or not you go to India, or when you go to India, all of these things. Now, unless we know everything, we're going to be trying to do this and trying not to do that. Even when we say he controls everything, to accept that totally means to be perfect. So we can't. But it's important to try to remember and feel the truth of the fact that every little event is controlled by someone who is the only one totally concerned about us. I mean, I think that's magnificent. But to realize that everything that happens he's the author of that. That means whether or not we go to India, or when we go to India. Now, in our limited state, we should always try to think the right things. My feeling about going to India is that I feel I will go very soon. I don't know. But my feeling is it's very important that I go to India. It's very important that I try to have the right relationship with Baba where I am. Because obviously he's everywhere. But then, should I go to India, I'm going to be far more receptive. Baba is wherever we are, but when we go into that atmosphere, the atmosphere, Baba says that most people in the world are shaped and chiseled by the forces of the environment. And the sociologists would agree with him. An individual who begins to come within that kind of consciousness that the God-man becomes increasingly important, increasingly the focal point of your attention. That individual is becoming aware of the fact he's like a rock where life moves around him. It's life that parts. The individual in that focus, in that conviction, stays where he is. And I think that in the Baba family, what we tried, perhaps part of the process of waking up, is to find out where we are in the sense we already believe in him, and to find out what that means in our daily lives. It's not a small thing at all. It's a very big thing. And our growth is to wake up to how big it is, because then that definitely begins to put the horse before the cart. Before that, it's the cart before the horse. Baba says, keep me in the front of your mind. Keep me in the front of your mind. So every event is controlled by him. That's a great source of relief. Even when we know we would prefer this rather than that, and that happens. It's a great sense of relief to know that everything that happens to us is for our highest good. And it's because of our conviction about the God-man, no matter how weak it is, that makes it possible for us to accept this. Another thing Baba once said, which is very, very important to us, and it was this business about free will, because it does have a bearing. Because sometimes it becomes important for us to know, just tell me, do we have free will or not? He's totally in control. He's totally God. We're committed to him even in our weakness. What free will do we have? Everything that happens is preordained. Baba's response to that is free will has always meant attitude. What happens to you is my will. How you take it is your will. Always. It's supremely important to try to remember that everything that happens is Baba's will. And by remembering that, to struggle to find the way to accept it. It's not easy. But it certainly should be possible when we begin to deal with the fact that we do believe that it is Baba's will, because he said so. And, gradually this can become acceptable to the intellect, and then the conviction goes beyond the intellect. how I would react to something I didn't like believing in Baba, and how I would react to something I didn't like not believing in Baba. Okay. I see a very substantial difference there. Basically, the difference means that I'm struggling to remember what belief in Baba is, and trying to focus in on that important reality, or trying to see it as a reality under those moments of stress. So there's a very, very big difference. There's a very big difference between the two. I've long since given up trying to, well, no, not long since given up. I don't think of spirituality anymore in the conventional sense. Well, it's been many, many years since I have. Spirituality to me, perhaps even way back, has always been a beautiful human being. A beautiful human being. It had nothing to do with labels. Had nothing to do with any external connections or any involvement with this, that, or the other thing. A beautiful human being was always beautiful because that individual had the capacity for concern for someone else. And that was the capacity to believe in God in a real way.
The mind fixed on the most important thing in creation, the only way, is to really work on it. A person wants to be intimate with Baba. A person wants to be intimate with God. What an incredible opportunity to have belief in the God-man. Because then it becomes possible to be intimate with God. It becomes possible. What the individual has to, I think, find out for himself is to wake up to the fact that all this talk about God is probably absolutely nothing but talk. All this apparent inspiration about God is not intimacy with God. That's what I believe. I believe that because it is so hard for me, and I believe in God. I believe in Baba being God in human form. And with that conviction, it's still hard. So I cannot help but believe that what appears to be interest by so many in God, and intimacy by so many with God, can't possibly be anything but some kind of an emotion. And of course, we're all familiar with emotions. Now, I'm not saying this in any way to disparage anyone, but I'm pointing up, I think, the rarity of that individual who achieves the slightest success in fixing his mind, you see, on the God-man, in the midst of the tremendous pressures of life. The tremendous distractions that are distractions because that's all you saw for millions of lifetimes. It's got to be that in the midst of sound sleep, your thought shouts at you and tells you you're asleep in the most eloquent way. That's what has to be done. It is so clear to me. It is so clear to me that one does not have Baba except through intense work. You could live with him every single day and it's not enough. You can believe in him 100% and it's not enough. You're not intimate with him because intimacy requires that you love him. You cannot love a stranger. You've got to know and believe with total conviction his concern for you personally. An intimacy that is far, infinitely beyond the intimacy of your own mother, if she happens to be a loving person. Far beyond that. Is that felt about Baba? No. And who, first and foremost, knows that we cannot love him easily? He knows that. He knows that he's the only one that deserves that love. And he knows that he's the only one that doesn't get it. You see? It's not easy, so how can I say anything other than fact that all of these pretensions about love for God are nothing but words? Cannot be. You become a crazy man like Hafiz. You think of nothing else. Night becomes day for you. That love can make midnight the blazing sun of noon. That's what that kind of love. That love transforms everything. Because there's no care about anything. There's no care. When you love, you don't care about less than love. That's why the world becomes an illusion. It becomes only an illusion when one loves because you don't care. That love is not to be had for nothing. It is not to be had for nothing. The conviction about the God-man is just the beginning.
so. Baba explains all these things about meditation. He explains all these things about the spiritual path. But nothing of what he explains does anything to make you love him. But he said many times that our inquiring minds demand these answers from him. But at the same time, he made it clear that only holding on to him will enable us to begin to see something more and more about him that will gradually eclipse every other preoccupation that the mind from time immemorial has been fixed on. You see, it's not easy. It's not easy. The quietness of the mind is necessary to become sober for a moment. It's only in soberness, it's only in those few lucid moments when you're quiet that you see the worthwhileness of Baba. Then the world, like the sea, comes rushing in again. And what are you going to do then? See, unless you've learned to float on his reality, what are you going to do except to be drowned, engulfed, inundated? It's very hard. I tell you that because I've struggled very hard in my own way when I believed from the very beginning. But now I see a little daylight. I see a little daylight, and the daylight tells me everything is worthless except trying to find the way to feel his reality, to know his importance in that feeling. And his importance should more than hold you up. It should lift you up. It should lift you up. It should cause you to feel inspired. And it should bring you hope. It should help you much better to cope with all the dreadful things that we have to cope with. The dreadful things are dreadful because we are negative. Negativity is the illusion we call life being too real. Too real. Too real to us means there is nothing else. There is no hope. That's what depression is. There is no hope. No hope that we can become convinced about. Conviction of hope is a feeling. But it must endure. It must be able to withstand the hard knocks of life. That takes work. Like anything that we go after, requiring effort, fixing the mind on it, training, working, spending much time. This is the greatest thing of all, and it's the reason for creation. It must require our time. So when we have been put in that school, where alone it is possible to gain that wisdom, that fixity of mind, that realization of the importance of what we only intellectually know. When we have been put in that school, by that school I mean we are born in a lifetime. That is the time of the God-man. The God-man has come within our lives by somehow convincing us, by somehow drawing us, even the weakest interest in the God-man. By weak I mean we still persist in all of our waywardness, and at the same time we believe this man. That's what I mean by weak. But that is such an extraordinary school to be in, that we have to force ourselves to think about these things so that we will act on this. The world, everything that distracts us, we must come to the place where that very distraction is what forces us to reappreciate the importance of God-man in our lives as the way, the symbol of the ultimate meaning. The appearance of the God-man. The closer you see him, the more you'll appreciate him. He's not alien in all of his divinity, because the very fact that you love these qualities, that you begin to recognize, tells you something about your real self. That's why you love those qualities. So with any understanding at all, there's every reason to be hopeful. And if a person does not feel hopeful at any given moment, that person must realize that he sent his consciousness off on a very, very unpleasant journey. Born by thoughts. Thoughts are always negative. Thoughts are always negative, or they're desire-ridden, or they're anticipating some kind of unfulfilling expectation. I'm going to get something, or I'm going to avoid something, whatever. You see, the thoughts about the God-man, Baba said, regarding everything that he's ever said or written, or all these incidents about his life, it can all be reduced to one thing, one thought. And this is what Baba said: anything that makes you think about me is a good thing. See? Anything. How simple he is. Baba knows everything, he controls everything, but he makes things simple because he knows how difficult it is for us. We must. And what draws us more is when we begin to feel his love. Look what he said. The only way to be intimate with me is to love me and to know that I love you. He's telling you, you can love me. You can know that I love you, but you don't know that now. You are not loving me now. But you will. You will. And he said, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. So in connection with what he said about thoughts, you really can't get rid of thoughts. And thoughts are what enslave us. Thoughts enslave us. So when you consider that statement, how it's been emphasized here, trying to make the mind blank. Blank from what? From thoughts. When you consider that, and then you consider Baba's statement, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable, then you begin to see the importance of trying to train your mind to, first of all, appreciate Baba to the extent where it becomes easier to think about him, a perfect being. I was trying to grasp in some way for myself how to think about Baba. And I was thinking, well now, here's someone who is perfect. So I began to think, what is that? His infinite consciousness. He knows everything. He is the only one who has the capability of being concerned about my state of consciousness, about my feelings, about the freedom that I don't feel. He's the only one being infinite and perfect. Why shouldn't that be enough to cause my mind to always prefer to think about him rather than the many things it does think about? Why shouldn't that be enough? That leads to the next step. You say, well, I do think about other things, obviously. And that no matter how important, the thought about Baba is very important because he symbolizes something very great. But notwithstanding that, the mind allows itself to be captive of these thoughts, enslaved, which brings about worry, irritation, reaction, concern, which makes illusion reality. So the work, Baba says, is that you have to do more work to think about me. Remember, you have a way of knowing when you're not thinking about me. And you have a way of critically examining what that state of mind is in terms of its quality for your own personal well-being. You find it to be anything but desirable for the most part. But yet when you think about me, why is it you don't feel something more? It's because while you're thinking about me, your mind is still thinking about this over here. So you really can't see and appreciate what I really am. So Baba makes this very clear in many, 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 many ways. And I also tried to think, I said, now, where did my thoughts come from? My thoughts come from the beginning of time. The beginning of time meaning that as I gradually gained consciousness, that consciousness I gained was consciousness of illusion. And that has existed from time out of memory. That has existed from the vast, vast stretches of mind that the mind can conceive of. Such vastness. It's good to dwell on the vastness of that. And you say, that is how it is. Out of all of that vastness, out of all of that consciousness dwelling on nothing but illusion, I have come to this place where I am now. And I am expected, after all of that vastness that has enslaved my consciousness with thoughts whose roots are as deep as that vastness, I am expected to, in one fell swoop, even though I believe about the God-man, to expect that thought about the God-man to make me forget all of this. It doesn't work that way. The fact that you can even begin to forget all of this by thinking of the God-man is itself a miracle if you begin to see how long you've come. The distance that we've come is unbelievable. To struggle very hard, and this is exactly what I tried to do. I tried to see, because first of all, I believed everything that Baba said. Even those things that I didn't understand, I nevertheless believed them, which made me wait patiently to try to understand them some way. That in itself was a miracle, because I believed him in spite of all of the vastness And this is what helps us. But we have to work. We have to work. He said, you have to think of me over and over and over again. It's remarkable that someone who actually loves us, totally, divinely loves us, in a sense where there is no separation, it's remarkable that our mind doesn't go to thinking about that person more. But yet, Baba says that. It's not easy to think about me. It's not easy to love me. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to obey me. But keep doing this. You see, we don't expect an instantaneous thing. Our reaction is that we expect an instant thing. When we expect something from the God-man, what we really expect is the satisfaction of our desires, the very thing that holds us a slave. That's what we want. When we want results, the results that we want are the satisfaction of our desires. And it's our desires that enslave us. That's the paradox. We have to wake up to that. We have to remember that our consciousness is not free, but our consciousness is something that is beyond description. We have a treasure that is beyond description. The ordinariness of a human being and everything that comes out of his mouth, everything that is seen in his actions. In spite of that ordinariness, that individual houses a treasure. Consciousness. Consciousness is not seen as a treasure because it's not been used. It's not been used to reveal its magnificence. It's used to be down in the pit of illusion, believing that what is unreal is real. But we're carrying around that magnificent accomplishment that took aeons of time to accomplish. We're walking around with it. It is so accepted and so ignored, which is incredible. Far more so than the sun, which is nothing in comparison. Consciousness includes everything. The sun is ignored, and yet it sustains all of life on this planet. But it's ignored. Except when it gets too hot, or it's too absent. And then it's thought about. So that consciousness is the treasure. And that consciousness is absolutely enslaved. And the only thing that has the only possibility of counteracting that which occupies consciousness, that rivets consciousness, the only thing is the conviction one has in a true God-man. That's the only thing. And that conviction, being weak, must grow until it becomes very strong. And it can only grow by constantly trying to find your own way. Every single road leads to the goal. Every single road leads to the goal. That means every state of mind, every individual, wherever he is on a path to the goal. But who wants to go the long path? Who wants to go through all that suffering? Because that's exactly what imprisoned consciousness means. It is without a doubt. Every thought is a shackle. So Baba says, try to be a witness. Try somehow to identify yourself with consciousness rather than that which holds consciousness captive, thoughts. Do that. He said, I am the way of doing that. Why Baba is so taken for granted is because he does not juggle illusion. He doesn't juggle illusion. Just as he said to those early disciples when they were so impressed that a stranger saw some kind of a magic thing coming from the bungalow where Baba was training his disciples. He saw this light emanate from this building. And they were saying, why? Why is it that we, your disciples, do not experience what a stranger experiences? And Baba's response was, you don't need these kinds of gimmicks. How cheap it is to allow ourselves to be swayed by these things. We have to do work and realize that it's nothing. Baba could give each one of us a planet and have everything on that planet that you think you want. And you'd have nothing because you're still enslaved. That's the point. You're still a slave. The king of the planet is a slave. The king of the universe is a slave because his consciousness has not been emancipated. That's how vulnerable we are. And the only key, I think what we have to realize is the only key is the God-man. That's what we have to realize. He said it. If one is there who has arrived at the goal, whose consciousness is totally emancipated. Remember what he said? You need me as a crutch. And he said, look how magnificent he is. At the right time, you can discard even me. At the right time. But what do you call a crutch that is absolutely indispensable? That's more than a crutch. But Baba is saying that you cannot do it on your own. If you think you make progress, you're kidding yourself. The events of life will bring you to another little rough place. Will smash you up against the side or against another boulder. And you'll find out you didn't have any freedom after all. You have a certain freedom. You have a freedom to use your thoughts, to place them in the only secure harbor there is, on the God-man, and let him do his work. That's the point. Impersonal meditation is very good. It's very good because when you begin to think about Baba, obviously you begin to think about his universal qualities. The form aspect of it is merely to focus your mind. It's a reminder of what you really are. A reminder. And what is so irresistible about what you can see in the God-man is irresistible because it's closest to your heart, because that is you. That is you. So meditation has to go on as much as we can accomplish it during the course of the day. Now, bear in mind also that Baba is explaining all of these things once and for all. But at the same time, he says the shortcut is to hold on to me. To hold on to me ultimately over and over and over and over and over again is to keep your emotions under control by thinking about me. By realizing what your emotions are. They're your enemy. That's your link with your very limited past. To try somehow to contain them in the right way. The right way is to see them with some degree of detachment. That's the work that we have to do. While we're feeling an emotion, we think about Baba, you're not going to get rid of the emotion. It has to go on. The thinking has to go on until there's some possibility of a change, until you begin to see the emotion for what it is. All of this is internal. It's what real spiritual work consists of. It's an internal thing. That doesn't have the kind of visibility that perhaps is thought of as being spiritual work, but it's the real work. It's the work of the real hero who knows that no matter what his mind places before him, he has to take it. And this is what Baba said. You have to, the conviction that you have to get is to find the way to believe that Baba is one totally in control of your life. That's no easy thing to do. These discourses, they do help us to appreciate Baba even more. Obviously, we need to appreciate him a great deal. And I think of the conviction that is not 100% needs to be fortified over and over and over again. And our minds are occupied with so many different kinds of ideas that are spread about by people who seem to know what they're saying. And always Baba gives you such a clear explanation of all of these things. And at the bottom of it is anything that helps you to think about me is a good thing. Another thing at the bottom is think of me in any way that you can, and in time you'll think of me in the right way. These are the things. Love cuts through everything. And when we begin to wake up to what Baba's reality really is and how intimately we are connected with it, it becomes so irresistible that true love begins to blossom. And when that happens, everything else melts away. There's no value to anything else except that love. And everything that's good comes in the wake of that love that begins to become awakened. And he is the awakener, the awakener. I have come not to teach, but to awaken. It's important to realize that no matter what it is we do, no matter how successful we are in terms of accomplishing that which many observing would say is a very formidable accomplishment, that to that individual he is not satisfied, nor will you ever be satisfied. The only time that you'll be satisfied is when your consciousness becomes disengaged from your mind. And that is the reason why, even at the stage when, let's say, your accomplishments are very minuscule as compared with someone up here, everything's relative. In the relative world, there's no accomplishment. What is an accomplishment, Baba says, is when you hold on to me, which means I have to become the focal point of your real effort. Your real effort. So that means that whether you're down here in terms of your life's work or your ability or your talent, you do the best you can and you don't worry about it, because the real thing that's happening is happening because you're thinking about me. See? And when you become less dissatisfied and do what you can, then you are doing the real work much better. And keep in mind that you are successful now. Keep in mind that you are successful.